What do you get when combining modern day gladiators and eggheads who insist on having rules and regulations for everything? If you were thinking public shaming and lynching of said gladiators, you'd be wrong. Instead we get padded protected gloves. And whilst watching and or participating in these events that use these gloves awakens a primordial itch that is almost irresistible for many to scratch, I have to wonder, why does that itch smell, and should I see a doctor about it? But more pressingly, where did the idea of padding and protection in combat sports start? We actually have the answer to that question. Depictions of ancient Egyptians dated as early as 2000 BC showed fighters had hand wraps supporting their wrist. Jump forward 500 years or so to ancient Greece, where it was common practice for strips of leather around the hands for protection. Many would actually consider this to be the true genesis of padded gloves. However, as most empires do, the Romans came along and took it too far by adding metal spiky pieces to the bits of leather. Hence the cestus was made and added to the famous gladiatorial armories. Now, due to the nature of this equipment being lethally utilized, let's say, the early versions of these combat sports were unceremoniously outlawed, notably boxing, in around the year 390 BCE, according to historians, which funnily enough was probably the year Tony Ferguson thought he was in after Michael Chandler head kicked him into the Shadow Realm. It wasn't until the 17th century that we actually see any form of glove really resurface, and seeing it as it was the Victorian bare knuckle era, they were only allowed for training and sparring purposes. They weren't even allowed for fights. All the way up until the 19th century, which is when those eggheads, aforementioned before, said we needed to now wear gloves, blah blah blah, rules and health and safety, blah blah blah. Whilst our means of laying a smackdown are still, in all intents and purposes, the same as they've always been, our technology and materials have vastly improved over time. Nowadays, gloves range from leather, synthetic, and a leather synthetic hybrid. Not only that, but gloves now can have complete knuckle and hand coverage. Not to mention the weight differences in the gloves, generally ranging from 4 ounces all the way to 16 ounces. 4 ounces being for MMA events, 8 and 10 ounce gloves being used for professional boxing and kickboxing events, and 16 ounce gloves being used in amateur boxing events. These are mine, the Ace Legacy gloves at 16 ounces, the Adidas 300 Hybrid Series at 16 ounces as well, and the Venom Challenger Model 1 at 4 ounces. You might be able to notice a difference between the first two pair, in which any case you're not Michael Bisping, and your eyes work. Yes, the Venoms are gloves designed for the greatest sport in the world, MMA. I'm going to demonstrate for effect now, and I know I don't have any wraps on, but the first thing anyone notices with these gloves is the padding is only on the top of the hand and knuckles with the fingers exposed, as you can see here. This not only allows for a high level of grappling and jiu-jitsu, but also allows John Jones to eye poke his opponent. The Challenger 1 was a genuine staple item when it first came out, but depending on the wearer, it was a synthetic nightmare, quite frankly. The glove often slid around when you were changing from open palm to a fist, and provided no noticeable sweat absorption despite its high density layered foam. However, that high density layered foam allowed for devastating shots whilst providing no real consequences to the wearer's hand. It also had a reasonable level of rigidity in the list, which was good of course until you needed to use a hitchhiker escape to get out of an armbar. The Ace Legacies at 16 ounces are a quality middle of the road glove. Whether you occasionally hit a bag or you're a consistent practitioner, these gloves were built to last. Now, whilst it does have a wide and thick knuckle surface area that makes it look like you're punching with bowling balls on your fist, your hands are secured in a tight hand-fit compartment where strikes are sure to land true, even if you're using Butterbean style of haymaker. With double Velcro wrist straps, the user's hand and wrists are kept in a relatively straight line, and the risk of damage due to bad form is reduced. And unlike most fighters in the third round, your hands will stay dry to the ultra moisture wick lining which disperses sweat back towards the wrist. However, These particular ones sadly have been retired earlier this year due to the knuckle padding on the right hand splitting after roughly around 3 years of use. See? You can see it right here. Which actually is quite a far cry from the Aces of old, such as the Ace 3 Fortunes. Now, keeping with the car analogy, just like the Aces were the everyman's car, now onto the sports model. The Adidas 300 Hybrids at 16 ounces are the latest addition in my arsenal. And whilst I'm far from being Mayweather, I definitely get the impression that I feel like him whenever I'm wearing these gloves. Comfortable, stylish and durable, Adidas has pulled no punches with integrating multi-crossweave layered foam. This dampens the impact to the wearer's hand, whilst also still allowing the user to feel where the weight of their strikes are landing. As you can see, the glove itself is longer than most on the market, this one nearly covering 2/3 of my forearm. See? The combination of the stiffness of the material around the wrist does allow for more reasonable stability. However, unlike the Aces, the trade-off with these gloves is your technique pretty much has to be spot on. Yes, the gloves are sleek, and that is great, don't get me wrong, but that does mean they are on the narrow side of gloves that are currently on the market, which if you throw something wrong enough times, the new multi-layered dampening in these gloves really isn't going to do anything to protect your hands, and trust me from experience, your body does not forgive easily. Now, I could give you the answer for what I think is the top glove out of this very limited selection here, but I really can't, genuinely. I've had too many close experiences with these gloves, all to the point where whenever I've been using them, at some point, they've felt like they've actually been a part of me. So my personal recommendation and the best advice I can give you is to research and go out and test drive. Pick the correct equipment for your sport and decide between price and comfort, or a little bit of both.